Listen, imagine if the worst tragedy in human history could have been stopped by just one guy saying yes instead of no. Imagine a world where the Holocaust never happened because a scrawny kid from Austria got into art school. It sounds like a crazy movie plot, right? But it's 100% real. History is a wild ride, and the guy we know as the ultimate monster started out as a nobody, sleeping on park benches and eating thin soup in homeless shelters. Adolf Hitler wasn't born a dictator. He was a high school dropout with a dream. He wanted to be a famous painter. He moved to Vienna with his head in the clouds, but reality hit him like a freight train. Twice, not once, but twice, the Academy of Fine Arts told him he had no talent. Can you imagine? If those professors had just given him a passing grade, the 20th century would have been about art galleries instead of gas chambers. But here's where it gets weird. While he was living in these shelters, he wasn't just sitting around, he was reading a lot. But he wasn't reading philosophy or science, he was obsessed with the occult, ancient Germanic myths, and some really dark racist pamphlets that were floating around Vienna back then. He was basically a 1910s version of a guy getting radicalized in an internet rabbit hole. Then came 1914. World War I broke out, and for Hitler, this was his big break. He actually begged the King of Bavaria to let him fight. He became a dispatch runner, basically a guy who had to run through mud and exploding shells to deliver messages. It was a suicide mission, but somehow the guy was lucky, like unnervingly lucky. In 1918, there was this British soldier named Henry Tandy. He had Hitler in his crosshairs. Hitler was wounded, unarmed, and just standing there. Tandy looked at him, felt pity, and lowered his rifle. He let the future monster walk away. Tandy later said, "I didn't like to shoot a wounded man." That one moment of mercy cost the world 60 million lives. After the war, Germany was a total mess. People were starving, the economy was in the trash, and everyone was looking for someone to blame. Hitler realized he had one superpower. He could talk. He wasn't just a speaker, he was an actor. He'd practice his hand gestures in front of mirrors for hours. He knew how to take a room full of angry, broke people and turn their fear into pure, unadulterated hatred. He joined a tiny group called the German Workers' Party. He wasn't even the founder, but he took it over and turned it into the Nazi Party. He gave them the swastika, an ancient symbol he twisted into a brand of terror. In 1923, he tried to seize power in a beer hall putsch. It was a total fail. He got shot at, ran away, and eventually got arrested. He was sent to prison, but it wasn't exactly a dungeon. He had a nice view, people brought him gifts, and he used that time to write a book called Mein Kampf. He literally laid out his plan to destroy Europe and kill millions. But back then, people thought he was just a crazy guy in a cell. Nobody took him seriously until it was too late. When he got out, the Great Depression hit. Germany was desperate. People were carrying wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. Hitler stepped in and said, "I can fix it." And for a while, people believed him. He used movies, radio, and massive rallies to make himself look like a god. Now check this out. Hitler was a total weirdo in his private life. He was a vegetarian, he hated smoking, and he was terrified of being touched. But the real shocker, he was a massive drug addict. His personal doctor, Theodor Morell, was a complete quack who injected Hitler with a cocktail of over 80 different drugs, including opioids, cocaine, and even bull testosterone. By the end of the war, he was a shaking, paranoid mess because of the chemicals in his veins. As he rose to power, he wasn't just killing his enemies, he was erasing them. He created the Gestapo, the secret police. If you said a joke about Hitler in a bar, you might disappear the next morning. Fear was his currency. He turned neighbor against neighbor. Then came 1939. He invaded Poland and started the most brutal war in human history, the Blitzkrieg, Lightning War. His tanks moved so fast because the soldiers were literally fueled by Pervitin, which was basically crystal meth in pill form. The Nazi army was a drugged-up machine of destruction. Hitler thought he was a military genius, but he was a gambler. He invaded Russia thinking he could win in a few weeks, but he forgot one thing, the Russian winter. His soldiers were freezing to death in summer uniforms because he was too arrogant to plan for the cold. While the world was at war, he was carrying out his most horrific crime, the Holocaust. This wasn't just war, this was an industry of death.
He used the same efficiency he used to build roads, to build death camps. It's the darkest stain on human history, and he did it all while sitting in his mountain retreat, drinking tea and playing with his dog, Blondie. By 1944, the tide had turned. The Allies were closing in. Hitler's own generals tried to kill him with a bomb in a briefcase. It exploded right under his feet, but a heavy wooden table saved him. He survived, but he became even more insane. He executed 5,000 people in revenge, hanging some from meat hooks. The end was coming. Hitler retreated to his bunker in Berlin, a giant underground concrete box. He was a shell of a man. His hair was gray, his back was hunched, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He was ordering ghost armies to attack, armies that didn't even exist anymore. He was living in a total fantasy world while Berlin burned above his head. In his final days, he married his longtime girlfriend, Eva Braun. They had a small ceremony while Russian shells were literally shaking the walls. A few hours later, they both suicided. He didn't want to be captured and put in a cage. He ordered his guards to burn his body so there would be nothing left of him. When the war ended, the world found out the true scale of his madness, the concentration camps, the destroyed cities, the millions of dead. Hitler wanted to build a 1,000-year Reich, but he only lasted 12 years, and he left the world in ruins. But here's the most astonishing part. Many people believe Hitler actually escaped. Stories of him fleeing to Argentina in a submarine have circulated for decades. Even the FBI investigated these claims for years. While roast historians say he died in that bunker, the mystery still haunts us. Hitler's life is a warning. It shows how a combination of a broken economy, a desperate public, and a charismatic pathopsychot can lead to the end of the world. It's a reminder that democracy is fragile and that we have to be careful who we follow. He was obsessed with architecture, wanting to build the biggest buildings in the world. He planned a city called Germania with a dome so big it would have its own weather system inside. Rain would literally fall from the ceiling because of the breath of the people inside. His hatred wasn't just for people, it was for modern art. He called it degenerate art and had it burned or sold. He wanted the world to look like a boring, perfect postcard, just like the ones he used to paint when he was homeless. Did you know Hitler was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1939? It was meant as a joke by a Swedish politician to mock the world's appeasement, but history isn't always good at taking a joke. That same year, he started the most violent era in history. Hitler was also obsessed with the Holy Grail and other religious artifacts. He sent teams of SS archaeologists all over the world, from Tibet to the Amazon, to find ancient weapons of power. This is actually what inspired the Indiana Jones movies. He had a secret nephew named William Patrick Hitler, who lived in the United States. William actually joined the U.S. Navy during World War II and fought against his own uncle. Imagine being the guy who has to tell your commanding officer that your uncle is Adolf Hitler. Hitler's health was so bad that he had a personal dentist who had to fix his teeth constantly because they were rotting from all the sugar he ate. He had a massive sweet tooth and would eat up to 2 pounds of chocolate a day. He was also terrified of being poisoned. He had a team of 15 women who had to taste every single meal Hitler ate. They would wait for an hour after eating to see if they died. Only then would Hitler eat his dinner. One of these women, Margit Wolk, survived the war and told the terrifying story. In the end, Hitler's legacy is nothing but a shadow. He didn't create a new world, he destroyed the old one. He didn't bring glory, he brought shame. The failed artist became the architect of hell. We study Hitler not to remember him, but to make sure we never see someone like him again. We study the banality of evil, how ordinary people can do extraordinary harm when they stop thinking for themselves. Hitler's bunker is now a parking lot in Berlin. There is no monument to him, there is no grave, just a flat piece of asphalt where people park their cars. It's a fitting end for a man who wanted to be a god. But the scars he left on the world are still here. The borders of countries, the technology of rockets, and the very way we think about human rights were all shaped by the struggle to defeat him. One of the most surprising things is that Hitler was actually Man of the Year for Time magazine in 1938. It wasn't an endorsement, but a recognition of how much influence he had, for better or mostly for worse. He also had a strange obsession with the spear of destiny, the spear that supposedly pierced the side of Jesus. He stole it from a museum in Vienna and believed that as long as he held it, he would be invincible. The day he lost it was the day he died. Hitler's rise was fueled by the big lie. He believed that if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually believe it. It's a tactic that politicians still use today, and it all started with a failed painter from Austria. He was a fan of German opera, especially Richard Wagner. He would listen to the music of the Ring Cycle and imagine himself as a Norse god leading his people to a glorious destiny. He lived his life like an opera, dramatic, loud, and ending in a tragedy. Even though he was a dictator, he was incredibly insecure. He had his photographers take hundreds of photos of him, but he would ban the ones where he looked silly or too human. He wanted to be a statue, not a man. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. When we see a leader who promises to fix everything by blaming a specific group of people, we should remember the starving artist in Vienna who had the same pitch. The story of Adolf Hitler is a story of what happens when we let hate win. It's a story of how a small person can cause a giant tragedy. It's a story we can never